So let me introduce Bart to you. He is our speaker this morning, and Bart is someone I know for umpteen long period of time because I was a member of the Ethical Society of Westchester from the time I joined ethical culture. So for the past 25 years, Bart has been the leader of the Ethical Society in White Plains. Not only that, he was also the executive director of our national organization, the American Ethical Union. So the ethical culture took over your life, my goodness. Professionally and for a day job, Bart was in social work and assistant executive director of a major agency, the Guidance Center in New Rochelle. He's been threatening to retire, and I think he's actually going to retire this year from the White Plains Society. So we were lucky to grab him in his last circuit. No, you'll continue to do things in your retirement. And the topic for Bart is waging peace. So welcome, Bart.
Thank you. Get a few things set up here. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing in retirement, hopefully, is a lot more music than I've been able to do in the last 25 years. And so I'm going to be a little bit music forward today as well. This is a song by Steve Goodman, Ballad of Penny Evans. Oh, my name is Penny Evans, and my age is 21. A young widow in the war that's being fought in Vietnam. And I have 2 infant daughters, and I do the best I can. Now they say the war is over, but I think it's just begun. And I remember I was 17 on the day I met young Bill. At his father's grand piano we play good old Heart and Soul. I only knew the left-hand part, and he the right so well. He's the only boy I slept with, and the only one I will. It's first we had a baby girl, then we had us 2 good years. It was next the 1A notice came, and we parted without tears. It was 9 months from our last good night, a second child appeared. And so it's 10 months and a telegram confirming all our fears. And now every month I get a check from an army bureaucrat. And it's every month I tear it up and I mail the damn thing back. Do you think that makes it all right? Do you think I'd fall for that? You can keep your bloody money, sure won't bring my Billy back. I never cared for politics, speeches I don't understand. Likewise never took no charity from any living man. But tonight there's 50,000 gone in that unhappy land, and 50,000 heart and souls being played with just one hand. And my name is Penny Evans, and I've just gone 21. A young widow in the war that's being fought in Vietnam. And I have 2 infant daughters, and thank God I'll have no sons. Now they say the war is over, but I think it's just begun. So today I'll be talking about waging peace, which may sound a bit odd. Waging, after all, is usually associated with war and violence, unlike peace, which is most often followed by "and quiet." I like, though, the second part of the definition from the online dictionary for wage: organize a series of activities in order to achieve something. And that's my intent today. The waging of peace should, in my estimation, really be unnecessary. After all, peace is the usual state of affairs for most of us in this country, most people across the world. Right? Think about it. The amount of time you actually spend engaged in violent activity, or even see actual violent activity, is very, very minimal. Right? I imagine if extraterrestrials were to come upon the planet and have the technology to kind of look and see what's going on all at once, what would they see? They would primarily see a bunch of people doing the thing, right? Going to work, chatting, whatever else. They wouldn't see a lot of activity that looks violent from the outside, right? But is that how we see it? Is that really how people imagine life is? And I think it's a very good question, and one that I'm trying to get to an answer on. You know, again, peace is our default mode of operation, right? That's what we do. So why would we engage in violence? We know that violence is disruptive. It takes people out of the possibility of having an actual life. It's got far-reaching consequences in terms of what happens to our cultures, right? So why would we spend so much time and energy thinking about violence? And, you know, violence is the antithesis of ethical, right? I mean, if we're really looking to say, what can we do to elicit the best of other people? Engaging in violence just doesn't even make the hit for that, right? I know people talk about self-defense and all that stuff. Forget that for a moment and just realize that the violence itself is causing harm. Even if you can find some ways to explain it or justify it, it's causing harm to somebody, right? Now, I imagine the biggest reason for using violence is that people believe in it, and they believe that violence will bring positive results. And actually, that can be backed up by evidence. Stephen M. Walt, who's a pundit, in 2016 had this article, "The Case Against Peace." And one of the things that they were noting in there is that long periods of peace are generally accompanied by long periods of division and growing division within those peaceful countries. Not that we saw that here at all. And external threats tend to draw people together, significantly increasing cooperation and reducing conflict, right? So on that end, you can make a case for saying, well, let's go ahead and, sorry, my computer has this thing where every so often it decides it doesn't really want to be a touch screen. Anyone ever experienced this? It's very upsetting when I'm looking at my text. Sorry about that. Yeah, so get back to Mr. Walt here. Okay, so he quotes Michael Dench, who's a researcher, who argued that war and external threats more generally were perhaps the single most important factor explaining the emergence of strong, centralized states and cohesive national polities. In particular, the pressures of international competition forced rival states to develop effective bureaucracies, efficient systems of taxation, and formidable armies. It also encouraged the promotion of patriotism and a dampening of internal divisions. He says, when the wolf is at the door, domestic quarrels are put aside in order to deal with the more immediate danger. I think it's worth noting that to be effective, there has to be an immediate and reasonable danger, right, that you're pushing against. And I'd argue that we're not really experiencing that with the kind of conflicts the United States has been dipping into recently. I don't think Ukraine was something that was really imminently on our minds before Russia decided to move in there, right? And I don't know that even Israel and Gaza were so much on our minds, at least in that immediate kind of way, until the recent messes over there. And the focus on these things does take us out of the possibility of doing things locally that really are within our purview, right? My main goal here today is to look at that particular thing. What is it that we can do ourselves, really, that can be waging peace? Right? Now, look, the downsides of military action are evident in the massive news coverage of all of the areas of conflicts, right? So many civilian deaths, whole neighborhoods reduced to rubble, continuation, exacerbation of long-standing cycles of retribution. And it raises the question, who most benefits from military actions and who suffers the most? The sufferers, to my mind, do not get the opportunity to truly question the war effort. And I have to wonder if the people who are most in harm's way were asked about going to war, would they say, yes, let's go? I imagine at least some would. Group allegiance is a strong motivator for people, and when facing serious threats, many will be ready and willing to go to sacrifice for the greater good. We actually saw a bit of this live on January 6, 2021, when a large group of protesters stormed the Capitol in Washington, D.C., to stop Congress from certifying the presidency of Joe Biden. Many of those protesters, so-called regular people who consider themselves good citizens, acted to protect their chosen leader and stop what they viewed as a threat to the country. People will get involved and will do things that may be seen as sacrificial. But it's also an example of how people can be manipulated to feel and act in ways that are destructive by exaggerating dangers and stoking fears. That kind of manipulation is critical to the success of war efforts, and we are subject to it through the constant barrage of news reports that portray violence happening in the world. I get the New York Times delivered to my house. I'm starting to wonder why, really. Every edition has things about Ukraine and things about Israel, and you know, it's just in there more and more and more, always stoking things up. And then it peppered up with whatever local violence is happening. It seems more of a account of violence than it is anything else. Though I guess that's what sells newspapers, isn't it? So maybe that's, you know, there's a method to their madness, certainly. So one of the things that I thought I'd look at, though, is really what are the consequences of violence in terms of actual deaths and destruction? So there's this article in the Washington Post, Conflict, War Deaths, Global Peace, Rise, Casualty. I'm trying to see who wrote it. I don't see it now anyway. Oh yeah, by Adam Taylor. It's an historic rise in global conflict deaths suggests a violent new era. This is from 2023. And I'll quote, more than 238,000 people died in global conflict last year, according to a new study released Tuesday, marking a massive 96% increase year over year in deaths related to conflicts. The startling figure found in the Institute for Economics and Peace's annual Global Peace Index reflects in particular the impact of two highly deadly wars in Ethiopia and Ukraine. Did people know there was a deadly war in Ethiopia in 2022? Show of hands. Didn't make a lot of news coverage, did it? I know I heard about it at least once. But Russia's invasion of Ukraine resulted in at least 82,000 deaths in 2022. This is an estimate by the study. But even more deaths were reported in Ethiopia, over 104,000 in that conflict between the national government and the regional forces of Tigray. Now, I find it, this is no longer a quote, I find it especially interesting to note that the huge death toll in Ethiopia seemed to go under the radar of the major news outlets. And the disparity speaks to how personalized reactions can be to reports of violence. It's also interesting to note that we care a lot more about violent deaths than other causes of death. So the other thing I went to is go back and take a look at 2022. How many people actually died in 2022? Anyone want to take a guess? 67 million people died in 2022. Now, going back and we look at 238,000 of those died in military-related conflicts or war, you know, from violent means, rather, which is 0.36%. 0.36%. Kind of interesting, isn't it, in terms of the level of care we have around violence and wars and things along those lines compared to the impact on actual people. And calls for peace are often muted and sometimes ridiculed, too. Though I really like this quote from Arundhati Roy. I don't know how to say her name. I'm very sorry. I should have looked that up. Anyway, she noted, "It's odd how those who dismiss the peace movement as utopian don't hesitate to proffer the most absurdly dreamy reasons for going to war. To stamp out terrorism, install democracy, eliminate fascism, and most entertainingly, to rid the world of evildoers." You know, we have a war industry that is just spending billions and billions of dollars and who knows how many person hours developing even better means for exterminating people, right? And it's becoming more and more effective, you know, so you can just level entire city blocks in moments, it seems, anymore. And again, the distraction of war coverage by the media, and it diminishes our capacity to organize and press for non-destructive ways to address human needs and resolve disputes, right? Where's the energy going for us to really figure out how to live peacefully together? We spend all this time with the tools of war. How much time are we spending on the tools of peace? Now, I got a lot of help from Marshall Rosenberg, who was the person who generated nonviolent communication as a style of communicating, later termed compassionate communication. Do people have experience with Marshall Rosenberg here and his stuff? I really like his stuff because what he looks to is to figure out what are the things that people have in common that can be utilized to help them understand each other and help them ratchet down conflict when there are conflicts that seem to be arising. Really very powerful. Unfortunately, it's also a little bit tricky to utilize. One of the things that I found personally, for instance, in trying to deploy the statements that are supposed to work is that if you are still learning them, sometimes they can seem kind of ingenuine to the people that are on the other side, and so it can make them feel like you're just trying to trick them or something along those lines, which can make people pretty annoyed. I got to add to the level of conflict that you're trying to lessen. So just a word to the wise: if you want to pursue this, pursue it with gusto. And with friends first, because you want to make sure you can kind of get it down right. But the important thing for me with what he was looking at is he was very concerned with how needs drive our behaviors. And needs drive our behaviors in many different ways. You know, certainly they drive us towards really fun things, you know, like having a good meal or having a good sex life and things along those lines. They can also drive us towards other things that are more difficult. And when our needs aren't being met, that will generate discomfort with us, right? And you can tell when a person's needs aren't being met because they're feeling anxious or depressed or angry or frustrated, right? When their needs are met, how are they feeling? They're related, they're happy, carefree, let's go, you know? That kind of thing is very freeing when your needs are being met. Well, so what Rosenberg really was noting is that our needs aren't colliding with other people's needs, right? Your needs stay within you. They are yours and yours alone. Other people may have similar ones, but they're not yours. Your needs are your needs. What gets us into trouble are the strategies we deploy to get our needs met, right? Because that can really cause a lot of crossing of lines that we may later regret. So he really looks to figure out how do you, suss out what's going on when a person's needs aren't being met, right? And the way you suss that out is you check on the feelings that seem to be emerging for someone, right? Because that will give you clues, right? And if you can help people talk about those things and you can listen without judgment, chances are pretty good you'll get to understand that a person is really just trying to get their needs met. And if we can figure out a way to do that, that also doesn't interfere with the needs of others, or in fact helps the needs of others be met, it's golden, right? Because we know at the other end of that, we're going to be feeling really good, all right? Now, how can you not be feeling really great when you have an experience like that? Thing is, here's the needs that he's talking about, right? Sustenance, safety, love, understanding or empathy, creativity, recreation, sense of belonging, autonomy, meaning, right? These are all basic needs that just everyone has them in some way, shape, or form to some degree, right? And you may remember Maslow had that whole hierarchy of needs, you know, where he's talking about, well, you know, first you kind of meet your sustenance needs, and then you have other needs that are a little bit higher order for love and affection, et cetera, et cetera. And you just keep going, right? Actually, one of the things that I was learning fairly recently about Maslow is before he died, he actually was going in a direction above the top of his pyramid. I don't know if people are aware of this. He was getting pretty mystical, actually, and saying that really there's a kind of a humanistic, something or other. I can't remember all of his terminology. But his idea was that at a certain point, you know, you have this self-actualization, but it's your actualization within the larger universe that is really what drives people's true happiness, right? When you can reach that point, that's when you're more likely to feel like, okay, I'm a part of this world in a way that is valuable to me, and maybe you would love that. Well, that's a good question. The thing is, again, since the Rosenberg formula can be a little bit difficult to put in play, I started wondering about, well, maybe there's other ways that we could help wage peace. And so I got involved with the blue zones. Anyone know blue zones? Okay, so I'll do a little explaining then. So this is Dan Buettner, I guess it is. Actually, he was a photographer for National Geographic, and also like biked around the world solo and did all kinds of wild things. Anyway, he got very interested in, he learned about some communities where the majority of people lived to be 100 years old and more. And they had very few health issues. And so he called these blue zones. Here's a thing from the TED Radio Hour on this that you can hear, by the way, if you want to get in your WNYC channels. The reason that people I've found are living a long time is not because they have some magical diet or longevity hack. It's simply because they're avoiding the diseases that foreshorten their lives. They're not dying of dementia, cancer of the GI tract, heart disease, strokes, type 2 diabetes, obesity, anywhere near the rate that we are in this country today. They have the same machines, the same biological machines, that is, that we have. They've just managed to expose that machine to an environment that has allowed them to live out the capacity of what we're all given. This, to mine, is waging peace on a community level, right? Finding ways that people can live good, solid, helpful, healthful, well-connected lives is peace waging, right? Because people who are happy and healthy are much less likely to think, I should do something violent now to get my needs met, right? Why would they? They're just going to ruin a good thing, right? So, there's 5 blue zones that he identified: Icaria, Greece; Okinawa, Japan; Ogliastra region, Sardinia; Loma Linda, California, interestingly enough; and Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica. So it says, so to make it to wage 100, it seems that a person must have to win the genetic lottery. However, many individuals have the capacity to make it well into early 90s and largely without chronic disease. Blue zones uncovered 9 evidence-based common denominators among the world's centenarians that are believed to slow this aging process. So I'll quickly do the 9. And by the way, if you get Netflix, there is How to Live to Be 100, and you can see some interviews with some of the people that he was involved in. It's charming, really. Anyway, move naturally. The world's longest-lived people grow gardens and do not have mechanical conveniences for house and yard work. right? So keep your body moving. Purpose. Know your sense of purpose is worth up to 7 years of extra life expectancy. All right, so find your purpose and work it. Downshift. Stress leads to chronic inflammation associated with every major age-related disease. What the world's longest-lived people have that others do not are routines that shed that stress. By the way, and one of the routines that I'll get to that later. Never mind. I see that I got that down later. 80% rule. These people stop eating when their stomachs are 80% full, right? And that really makes a nice difference. And there's a plant slant. Plant-based diets just are much better for your longevity than non-plant-based diets. So beans, including fava, black soy, and lentils, are the cornerstones of the most centenarian diets. Here's a surprising one, I think, for some people anyway. Wine at 5. People in all blue zones, except for the Seventh-day Adventists in California, drink alcohol moderately and regularly. Moderate drinkers outlive non-drinkers. And this is like 95% of the people in these populations are having their, some level of alcohol every day, almost, or every week at least. The trick is to drink 1 to 2 glasses per day with friends and or with food. All right? You don't want to just drink for the drinking. And no, you cannot save up all week and have 14 drinks on Saturday. All right. Whoops. Uh-oh. Went back to the beginning again. I told you. Come on. So the really unfortunate thing, so I often use Dropbox. I'm sorry, this is an aside for sure. And Dropbox is really cool because it goes on all your devices. But for whatever reason, when I'm working with the file on this computer in Dropbox, every so often it will get one of these hiccups and all the text will disappear. And I can't get it back. And it's like, let's wing it. I don't like winging it that much. Okay. Here we go. Okay. And this is the one that I wanted to talk about before. Belong. Research shows that attending faith-based services 4 times a month will add 4 to 14 years of life expectancy. And I should add, by the way, ethical societies actually rate as faith-based, even though you may not, think we're a religion. But it doesn't really matter which group you go to. The important thing is going and being with other people, right? And doing it kind of for the reason of developing community and that sort of thing as well, right? Really a great idea for you guys to be here today. You've added life to your lives. So here. Loved ones first. This means keeping aging parents and grandparents nearby or in the home. That actually lowers disease and mortality rates of children as well, which is interesting. And a commitment to a life partner can add up to 3 years of life expectancy. And these folks invest a lot in their children and put a lot of time into just loving them, right? A good idea. And the last is right try. Research shows from the Framingham studies that smoking, obesity, happiness, and even loneliness are contagious. So the social networks of long-lived people have favorably shaped their health behaviors. Right? Something to think about. I know you guys do like eating things together, right? That is probably a really great example of a way to kind of be together that is very wholesome and hearty and brings you all together. Just saying. Anyway. The thing is, trying to bring this out beyond your community, though, is the bigger part, right? Because waging peace within your community, you guys aren't fighting at least I haven't noticed any fighting today. You guys probably aren't doing a lot of fighting yourselves, but you probably have many opportunities within your neighborhood to be in more conflict-laden engagements, right? Whether there's people who cut you off on the road or people who take a very long time with their groceries at the food store, or somebody who wears a button for a political person that you think is a total idiot and shouldn't ever be reelected. Those sorts of things, can really get under your skin, right? And be the kind of the cause for stuff. So how do you find ways to kind of get past that? So there's this fellow, Robert L. Humphrey. I don't know if people know this name. It was not a very popular book, Values for a New Millennium. Humphrey worked for the government, and his job was to go into different countries that had a U.S. military presence and figure out why people hated the U.S. military presence so much, and figure out ways to do things about that. So in one case, I forget what country this was, but a lot of the soldiers were getting beaten up by the locals when they're coming back from bars at night. And what he realized is these guys are walking around like with guns and stuff like that, and that just really irritated people. And it got people realizing that they were afraid. And when people are afraid, they're real targets, right? That's like a target magnet for people that would like to take it out on somebody and not happy with their presence. And so what he actually did was do boxing lessons with these soldiers and teach them how to defend themselves so that they could leave their weapons behind and just walk with some level of confidence. And that made a huge difference. People respect somebody who will try to, fight it out with you a lot more than somebody who, draws a gun and, tries to, intimidate you. He also, though, it's a funny thing, in European and in this country too, we seem to have a thing about toiletry and paper that we use to clean ourselves after we go to the bathroom. Is anyone familiar with this? Toilet paper, I think they call it. It's very rare in most of the world to see toilet paper, right? Because, first of all, people realize it's not very hygienic, and it's not very effective at taking care of the problem, which is cleanliness, right? But the fascination that the U.S. soldiers had was incredible, and so there was all these interactions there. And what they really weren't understanding is that their point of view was off. Right? And they couldn't get out of it, right? So I just wanted to read a quick clip. So there's this one, there's a sergeant who was this real tough nut, and yet he was very strongly defending the local folks to soldiers that were making fun of them. And he says, you better believe they got something to live for. If you doubt it, let me see you jump down there and try to kill one of them with your hunting knife. They'll fight you like no one ever heard of. I fought beside them in heavy combat, and I don't know either why they seem to value their lives so much. But both in combat and in freezing prison camps, they hung in there after a lot of Americans was yelling quit. So somebody asked him, well, how would you prove that you believe these people are your equals? And this is what he said. You got to be able to jump down off the truck, into the sheep manure, go over there into that village of mud huts, walk down those narrow streets, and pick the dirtiest, stinkingest village peasant that you meet. And as you walk past him, you got to be able to make him know, just with your eyes, that you know that he is a man who hurts like we do, hopes like we do, wants for her kids just like we do. That's how you got to be able to do it, and nothing else is going to work. So often, I think we wind up in situations where we don't quite get what's going on with people. And if we utilize our own expectations and how we see ourselves as the basis for what's going on with them, it's bound to end badly, right? One of the things I've been seeing more is that there's this realization that empathy is not really the best way to connect with someone who is different from you and suffering, right? Because when people are engaging in empathy, generally they're feeling the feeling that they think somebody else has, right? And that tends to shut them down, right? That tends to trigger all kinds of unfortunate emotional characteristics that you won't find helpful. But if you can sympathize, that is, if you can listen to what a person is saying and help imagine what that person is going through, not what you would be going through in their place, but what they are going through, all right? This is a deep listening, a deep awareness is really the key to being able to connect, be able to listen, and be able to hopefully do something that might be helpful. The listening itself is often really good, but there might even be other things, once you are established in a connection, that you can really help with, right? And that would be a good thing. So, where's my end here? Oh, okay. All right. So, bottom line, there are, I imagine, many pathways to peaceful coexistence, and ethical humanism provides a way that is accessible to all. And if we keep at it, a way that can successfully build a more equitable and more compassionate community to the benefit of each and all. So, let us pursue a path to peace that honors the unique worth of each person and appreciates the potential of people to come together to bring goodness to the world we live in. And I'd like to close with a song. This is From a Distance by Julie Gold. I don't unplug myself first. From a distance, the world looks blue and green, and the snow-capped mountains white. From a distance, the ocean meets the stream, and the eagle takes to flight. From a distance, there is harmony, and it echoes through the land. It's the voice of hope, it's the voice of peace, it's the voice of everyone. From a distance we all have enough, and no one is in need. There are no guns, no bombs and no disease, no hungry mouths to feed. From a distance, they are instruments marching in a common band, playing songs of hope, playing songs of peace. They're the songs of everyone. From a distance, you look like my friend, even though we are at war. From a distance, I can't comprehend what all this fighting is for. From a distance, where is harmony, and it echoes through the land. It's the hope of hopes, it's the love of loves, it's the heart of everyone. It's the hope of hopes, It's the love of loves, it's the song of everyone.